In the first term, Tulsi Gabbard was a vocal critic of the Rubio-Trump effort to overthrow the government of Venezuela. She called it disastrous. Now she's serving as Trump's director of national intelligence. What does she have to say about all of this? Well, so far it's not very encouraging.
So recently, Aaron Maté went on Judge Napolitano's podcast exposing Tulsi Gabbard's gravitation toward regime change, her open support for it in Venezuela, which makes it the second theater of war in the Trump administration. She favors that kind of policy. Let's get his take on this. Please like the video and subscribe to the channel.
Yesterday, the United States Navy announced that at some point, either yesterday or in the days preceding, it had blown up a speedboat carrying 11 purportedly Venezuelan persons whom the government said were, quote, narco terrorists on their way to the United States to deliver a cache of some sort of a controlled dangerous substance. No charges were filed. No arrests were made. They were just blown out of the water. As you and I are speaking, you're seeing the film, the footage of what happened to it. There it is. An American naval ship destroyed this boat and killed everybody that was on it. What kind of fidelity to the Constitution? What kind of a presidency does this?
Well, a presidency that has no fidelity to the Constitution, but fidelity to longstanding plans for regime change in Venezuela. Recall that in Trump's first term, at the behest of people like Marco Rubio, Mike Pompeo, and John Bolton, Trump launched a coup attempt in Venezuela, stealing Venezuelan state assets, including its oil company, and trying to install a puppet, Juan Guaido. And the main strategy there was to just destroy the economy through not only stealing Venezuela's resources, but imposing murderous sanctions. In the second Trump term, now that he's back in office, they've taken to surrounding Venezuela with thousands of Marines, sending naval warships around there to intimidate the government and try to foment more unrest. And now it looks like as part of this, they're going after boats leaving Venezuela, whom they claim are drug dealers. And whether that's true or not, it doesn't really matter. There's no legal basis at all for launching military strikes on this ship.
Yeah, that's an understatement. This is criminal behavior. So when I condemn my government for its absurd foreign policy, its backward foreign policy, this is an example. Venezuela has not really been under a microscope. This story has been underreported, but this is an act of war on Venezuela in the Caribbean, where the U.S. doesn't have jurisdiction. And if it did have jurisdiction, these people would deserve due process. This was an act, a belligerent act against people in the Caribbean. They're using the narco-terrorism line now. It used to be free speech attacks or the narco-terrorism route. They're still bombing them regardless, and this is absurd.
Of course, we shouldn't even assume that there were drugs on this boat until there is more evidence. But even if that does emerge, I think you'd agree this is completely illegal, right?
It's absolutely illegal. It's an act of murder. If everything the government says were true, if these were people who wished us harm, if they had a huge cache of drugs, what should the government have done? Waited until it got into American waters or waters that the U.S. claims, stopped the boat, searched the boat. It could have gotten a search warrant from a federal judge in Miami, searched the boat. If there are drugs there, seize the drugs and arrest the people on it.
Exactly, with due process. This is an act of violence, an act of war, certainly egregious. It's against international law, if that's your sort of thing to pertain to. But under our constitutional system, it's not even something the president can unilaterally order. A series of legal precedents have essentially stripped Congress's right to do that, like the AUMF and the War Powers Act. But that doesn't override the guiding voice of the Constitution. If you still believe in the Constitution and the limitations and parameters it forces the government to act within, well, that they aren't acting within that. We have, a Constitution that's on life support, saying it lightly here.
Instead, they perform a pre-conviction extrajudicial execution for a crime, even if charged and convicted, that doesn't carry the death penalty. So, Trump got away with murdering General Soleimani in the first term. How many people is he going to murder in the second term?
There's a long record of this. Some of the people who served in Trump's first administration were involved in the dirty war against Nicaragua in the 1980s. And it was there that the U.S., under the Reagan administration, mined the harbors of Nicaragua. And that was later ruled by the International Court of Justice to be an act of international terrorism. And the U.S., of course, ignored the ruling. But that established a long-term precedent by the U.S. that goes back even before then, but this is just part of that trend of the U.S. self-declared right to use violence in Central America against governments it's trying to destabilize. And so this is an outgrowth of that. And I worry about what's next. I mean, the people in Washington and in the Trump camp are obsessed with regime change in Venezuela. For Marco Rubio, this is what I think gets him up every morning, is the dream of overthrowing Maduro. Because
yeah, that's right. This is the neocon aspiration. It's the empire builder's dream. Marco Rubio, not unlike John Bolton and John McCain and Lindsey Graham in this way. That is what they live for. That's how they thrive. That's the only policy they believe in and default to, regardless of any other considerations to Americans or any peace overtures or any diplomatic or trade overtures. It's always the default is war to the neocons. That's the same in Trump administrations as it was in Bush's and Biden's.
Maduro, is the head of a state that has a lot of oil, the world's most valuable oil reserves, according to some estimates, and they've been trying to overthrow his government. That's why they recently doubled the bounty on Maduro's head, falsely claiming he's the head of a narco trafficking operation. While meanwhile, so many U.S. clients in Central America over the years have been the actual narco traffickers. After the U.S. backed a coup in Honduras, the new government was heavily involved in narco trafficking. My colleagues at the Gray Zone did a lot of reporting on this. The Contras in the 1980s, whom the U.S. was supporting to overthrow the government in Nicaragua, they were allowed to fly drugs on CIA chartered planes,
right,
to finance their operations. So this whole thing, on top of being flagrantly illegal, just reeks of hypocrisy.
But even if these guys were delivering drugs to compatriots in the U.S., it's a crime. It's not an act of war.
Sure.
I mean,
I think it's an act of war if it's against a Venezuelan ship in open waters, but hey, Napolitano has lots of great legalistic expertise here. But even if all these allegations were true and they were carrying drugs, this is a belligerent act. It's a vile crime. It's a murder. It's a murder that our corrupt government's going to get away with. If this was one of you or me ordering this assassination against these 11 people, we'd be behind bars for life. It'd be premeditated murder in the first degree with 11 victims. Are government officials going to face any kind of, penalties like that or even scrutiny? No. And this story isn't even being largely covered right now.
President, in defiance of a ruling from a federal judge in California yesterday, still thinks he can use the military for ordinary law enforcement. Here's President Maduro responding to all this. Chris, cut number 11.
8 formidable military ships carrying a substantial arsenal of 1,200 missiles, along with a powerful nuclear submarine, are currently targeting the nation of Venezuela. Es una amenaza extravagante. It is an utterly extravagant, completely unjustifiable, and profoundly immoral threat, a truly unacceptable and dangerous proposition. Absolutamente criminal, sangrienta. And truly, absolutely criminal, utterly bloody. Absolutely criminal.
It is, and no matter what you think about Maduro, he's right about that. This was criminal.
They have wanted to move forward with what they call maximum pressure, in this case military. And in the face of maximum military pressure, we have declared maximum readiness to defend Venezuela. Mr. President Donald Trump, you need to watch out. Because Marco Rubio wants to stain your hands with blood, with South American, Caribbean, Venezuelan blood.
Well, they've already been stained with the blood of 1 million Ukrainians and over 100,000 Gazans, so I guess add another hemisphere to the blood-stained hands here. That's what we're getting at.
They want to drag you into a bloodbath and have your last name, Trump, be stained with blood for all eternity.
It's too late. Too late.
With a massacre against the people of Venezuela, with a terrible war against South America and the Caribbean, because this would be a full-scale war across the entire continent. They want to stain Donald Trump's hands with blood. Le quieren manchar las manos de sangre a Donald Trump.
What is Rubio's hand in all of this, as you understand it, Aaron?
To encourage it. Here's a spoiler alert. To foment this, encourage it, and to lead the president into policies that would either lead or foment the overthrow of the Venezuelan government. That's the spoiler, but let's hear what Aaron has to say.
I think he's running point on this. As you know, he comes from Florida. That's where he was elected senator, and Florida is the heart of the regime change lobby for Central America, home to a number of exiles from countries like Cuba and Venezuela who are dedicated to overthrowing the governments that they have long been opposed to in their home countries. And so that's who Rubio represents. That's the basis for the coup attempt in Trump's first term. Marco Rubio was very heavily involved in that, and so this is the agenda that he's now pushing. I'd love to hear the take of another Trump cabinet member. That's Tulsi Gabbard. In the first term, Tulsi Gabbard was a vocal critic of the Rubio-Trump effort to overthrow the government of Venezuela. She called it disastrous. Now she's serving as Trump's director of national intelligence. What does she have to say about all of this? Well, so far it's not very encouraging. She fired some intelligence officials who had challenged the Trump-Rubio fantasy that Maduro is heading gangs and sending them into the United States. And when intelligence established that there's no basis for that, the intelligence officials who were apparently behind this assessment were fired by Tulsi Gabbard.
Yeah, I mean, this reeks of Caldwell being fired by the Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth a few months ago, and this is part of Tulsi's term. And, she has gotten close to the levers of power, and the closer you get to those levers of power, the more compromised you become by the military-industrial complex, the Israel lobby, etc. I think that is what's happened to Tulsi Gabbard, because you haven't just seen it here when it comes to Venezuela, and Aaron's absolutely correct about that. She did posture immense opposition toward Trump's policy toward Venezuela, but also we saw this be unveiled in the situation with Iran, where she had a threat summary, an annual threat summary back in March, where she read the report saying that there's no evidence that Iran reconstituted its nuclear weapon, and they're not close to having a nuclear weapon at all. Their program wasn't even reconstituted. Then on the very eve, the literal eve, the day before the U.S. bombed Iran, those 3 facilities, she said, we've gotten intelligence indicating that Iran is weeks away from a bomb. This was a compromising turn. She is being influenced one way or the other. It's either her caving to pressure or being told what to say, and this might be a similar situation in Venezuela.
So far, by all publicly available indications, Tulsi Gabbard is going along with the same regime change agenda in Venezuela that she vocally opposed in Trump's first term.
One has to wonder what she's doing in the Trump administration, unless she's just had this radical transformation in her thinking. I mean, her statements on the floor of the House of Representatives, her other public statements, her voting record in the House of Representatives did not give any indication that she would become a neocon, which apparently she's on the verge of doing now. I know she was at Ron Paul's 90th birthday party. I was invited and couldn't make it. She apparently made a lovely speech there in his behalf. Isn't it odd to honor the country's foremost libertarian, they invite the country's leading spy?
Yeah, I guess so. I was at that celebration to Ron Paul, his 90th birthday. I saw Tulsi speak there. She said nothing of regime change. She wasn't supposed to. She was there to compliment Ron Paul and his contributions. I'm glad she's warmed toward Ron Paul, and I have the fondest admiration of Ron Paul. He's my biggest ideological influence that's living right now. Certainly so. But he is right. Napolitano is right. This has been a term, and it has been a turn toward the Washington status quo. One might ask why. It's hard to know exactly why, but we are seeing that play out with her.
You can't make this up. I told the people that invited me, I said, you got to be kidding. If she's there and you let me speak, maybe you don't want me. I will remind her about the Fourth Amendment.
Well,
right,
just one word. It was important when she went to Congress earlier this year and said Iran is not working on a nuclear weapons program. That's the U.S. intelligence assessment. I'm sure she was under pressure to say otherwise, and she didn't. So in all these situations, you have to acknowledge all the things worth criticizing, but also recognizing that there are bright spots. And I think Tulsi Gabbard saying that was one of them. And it was humiliating for her when Trump got up and said, I don't care what she says, because he was determined to bomb Iran anyway. But the fact that she said it, I think, was significant. And I wonder if someone else in her position wouldn't have even said that.
Aaron's right about that, but after that, she did turn on that. In her tweet the day before the bombing, she did kind of reverse her opinion, but Aaron is very charitable. I really admire him for that. He has journalistic integrity, looking at all the information before jumping to conclusions or leaping to a political declaration. Perhaps I could benefit from that style more. But he's right. There has been pressures involved, and that threat summary, it might not have been delivered otherwise, but in the run-up to Iran, we know from reporting from Max Blumenthal in the Gray Zone that there was a facilitation between the director of the CIA, John Ratcliffe, and Mossad agents coming in to try to persuade Trump to bomb Iran, and she was probably part of that persuasion campaign. The best way to twist public opinion is to have the country's biggest intelligence officer coming out in favor of it, just in coincidental timing to launch those first bombs. And that's what I think we saw there. We're seeing it play out in Venezuela. Why is this story so undercovered? Why is no one talking about the idea of floating regime change in Venezuela taking place right now? It is overshadowed by Israel and Ukraine, rightly so to some extent, but this should get more coverage, and I appreciate Aaron for shedding light on it. Let me know down below, do you agree with Aaron on this? Why is the Venezuela story undercovered? And has Tulsi Gabbard really shifted her opinions, or is it just a matter of being pressured by power centers, the Israel lobby, and the military-industrial complex? Let me know in the comments down below. Please like the video, subscribe to the channel, also subscribe to Judge Napolitano, and please consider becoming a YouTube member. If you click the join button down below the video, you can help support the channel, and in return, I'll give you access to all of my videos before they go live to the general public on YouTube. And until I see you guys next time, no more war, no more debt, no more inflation, and no more empire. Peace out, guys. Catch you in the next one.